Sports, pride and dignity, stop the New World Order. Welcome to Hapanwo TV. I'm here in Oxford and I'm off to an event. It's the Extinction Rebellion meeting in Oxford. I'm heading there now. Just heading across Magdalen Bridge now to this event, which is in the city centre. It's a bit of a well, let me tell you a little bit about it first, and we'll come back to my experiences.
Right, this is the event I'm going to. It is called Climate Change, Heading for Extinction and What to Do About It, featuring Oxford Extinction Rebellion speakers plus George Monbiot, or as Alex Jones calls him, Lord Monbiot, that spindly little twit. And that's this evening at 7:30 at the Wesley Memorial Church. It says here, update featuring George Monbiot. That was originally what they were saying. The planet is in crisis. We are in the midst of the 6th mass extinction event this planet has experienced, and we are entering a period of climate breakdown. This is an unprecedented global emergency posing grave risks to food supplies and human life. In this public talk, the writer George Monbiot, the climate change scientist Dr. Rachel Trehan, and members of Extinction Rebellion will share the latest science on where our planet is heading, discuss some of the current psychology around climate breakdown, and offer solutions through the study of social movements. Everyone is welcome, and there will be plenty of time to ask questions and discuss afterwards. Entry is free, although you may ask for donations to cover higher costs. Right, Extinction Rebellion, that sounds quite dramatic. Let's look a little bit more into it. Right, now this is the organisation. This is behind the event I'm going to go to tonight. Extinction Rebellion. And it's not so much an organisation as a movement. It's a grassroots movement. And its logo is this symbol here, which I actually recognise before I recognise it, because I've seen it before I realised what it was. In fact, I saw it when I was at work, because it's in the windows of one of the homes that I regularly pass when I'm working. And it's non-violent resistance to avert climate change and biodiversity loss, minimise the risk of human extinction and ecological collapse. Now, it was established in the United Kingdom in 2018 with about 100 academics signing to a call to action, and other activists from the campaign rising up, which may refer to the sea level. I don't know about that, but it's inspired by Occupy, Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, the suffragettes, etc., the civil rights movement. It's a non-violent pressure group, street protests, things like that. Even the symbol itself is quite alarming. As I said, I've seen this symbol around quite a lot. It's I think this is quite popular in Oxford. I mean, the Facebook group actually indicates there's a large number of people going along. It's obviously here an hourglass within a circle. It's indicating time is running out. Its demands are the government must tell the truth about climate and the wider ecological emergency, to reverse inconsistent policies and work alongside the media to communicate to citizens. The government must legally enact binding policy, measures to reduce carbon emissions to net zero by 2025. That's blimey, that's just 6 years away. And reduce consumption levels. So this is like kind of a state of emergency they're calling for. A National Citizens Assembly to oversee the changes as part of creating democracy fit to purpose. And the binding policy to reduce carbon emissions. If you check the link in the description box to my previous videos on this subject, you'll see that that is quite an alarming statement. It covers a multitude of sins and state interventions of various kinds, and desperate people will demand desperate things, and reducing carbon emissions to net zero by 2025 is one of them. That's net means they basically so this offset includes things such as offset and things like that to absorb carbon dioxide and things like that. As I said before, desperate people will demand desperate things, and the government will say, okay. And that's the danger here, which I'll say more about in the course of this video. They've got stated principles, mobilising for active change, the use of momentum-driven organisation, creating a world that is fit for generations to come, creating a culture which is healthy, resilient and adaptable, leaving our comfort zones to take action for change. That's it. There's all kinds of things about welcoming everybody, and breaking down hierarchies of power to a more equitable participation. Well, again, that's another thing which often leads to even more power, as we've seen in various revolutions throughout the centuries, often like France, Russia, etc. We live in a toxic system, but no one individual is to blame. No one. Using non-violent strategy and tactics is the most effective way. We create structures that need to challenge power, etc., etc. And they've written an open letter here. The science is clear, the facts are incontrovertible. It is unconscionable to us that our children and grandchildren have to bear the terrifying brunt of an unprecedented disaster of our own making. Our government is complicit in ignoring the precautionary principle and failing to acknowledge that infinite economic growth on a planet with finite resources is non-viable. When a government willingly abrogates its responsibility to protect its citizens from harm and to secure the future generations to come, it has failed in its most essential duty of stewardship. It is now our moral duty to bypass the government's inaction and flagrant dereliction of duty and rebel to defend life itself. We therefore declare our support for Extinction Rebellion, as we stand fully behind the demands for the government to tell the hard truth to its citizens. We call for a citizens' assembly to work with scientists on the basis of extant evidence in accordance with the precautionary principle to urgently develop a credible plan for rapid, total decarbonisation of the economy. Right, now the precautionary principle is one mentioned in Adam Curtis's The Power of Nightmares, which came up in the live stream the other day, actually, the first live stream I did. It says it defines actions on issues considered to be uncertain in risk management. The principle is used by policy to make us to justify discretionary decisions in situations where there's a possibility of harm from making a certain decision. I think what they mean is you need to assume something is extremely harmful just in case it is extremely harmful just in case it is. That's a very, very interesting statement they're making. Now, there's this first open letter was actually had a number of signatures, and I recognise some of the names on this particular signatory on this letter. For example, Rowan Williams is the former Archbishop of Canterbury. There's a couple of others. Harvey Goldstein, for instance, is on there. That's all. That's the original. There was a second open letter, which kind of came out in December 2018, which is. It says here, political leaders worldwide are failing to address the environmental crisis. If global corporate capitalism continues to drive the international economy, global catastrophe is inevitable. We further call on concerned global citizens to rise up and organise against current complacency in their particular context. And so joining the global movement, rebelling against extinction, we must do whatever is necessary, non-violently, to persuade politicians and business leaders to relinquish their complacency and their denial. Their business as usual is no longer an option. Global citizens will no longer put up with this failure of planetary duty. Every one of us, especially in the materially privileged world, must commit to accepting the need to live more lightly and consume far less, and to not only, I think they mean not only to, and not only to, bloody bad grammar, uphold human rights, but the stewardship responsibilities of the planet. There's a few more names on here I recognise. Some of them you might recognise too. Naomi Klein, Naomi Klein is connected to the Tavistock Institute. And I won't go into details now, but she's a psychologist and psychoanalyst, and well, I've had personal experience of the effects of her machinations. Chris Packham is a biologist and naturalist. He used to present TV programs. he's come up in the Skeptics video where I discuss Bigfoot. Now, Vandana Shiva is a anti-GMO activist in India, and has tried to bring out local economy. There's Rowan Williams again. Noam Chomsky, who's a left-wing activist, Philip Pullman, who is an author who's written some excellent fantasy stories. Oh, he doesn't like calling them fantasy, but they are some excellent stories, excellent novels about parallel universes and things like that. There's Caroline Lucas is on the list. Now she's a Green Party. She's the leader of the Green Party, and it's only MP in Parliament. Her husband actually was my English teacher at school, strangely enough. She's been very opposed to the men's rights movement, and she's been debating with several people in Parliament who are questioning feminism, and she's quite opposed to them. Now, one name I'm very surprised to see on the list is Guy McPherson. Guy McPherson is travels around the world talking about climate change, but he does so with a proviso that basically we're all going to die. He says there's a conspiracy. See, I think there's a conspiracy to do with climate change. Guy McPherson's conspiracy is very different to my own. Guy McPherson's conspiracy theory about climate change is that yes, the government and the scientists and the oil companies and everyone else are lying to the public. They're having a conspiracy of silence to keep the truth away from the public. But you see, it's a very different kind of truth. I believe that the truth they're keeping away from the public is that basically climate change is a non-issue. It's not caused by human interaction. What Guy McPherson is saying, the truth they're trying to hide, is that basically we're all doomed. It's too late to stop it. It's going to destroy the earth. We've all had it. And he goes around and around the world giving out these very depressing, very nihilistic lectures. And for some reason, lots of people go along to see him, and they give him a round of applause at the end to be told we're all going to die. It's all over. We've had it. And yeah, people will pay good money to see this guy prophesize their imminent destruction. I mean, he literally says we got like maybe 10 years, then we're all dead. Guy McPherson. I suppose if you keep paying the guy to do this, he's going to keep doing it. Why anyone would want to keep being told they're all going to die, I don't know. If it were true, I don't think it is. If it were true, I wouldn't want to keep hearing it and being reminded all the time. Right, there's some other supporters are listed here on the second letter. Chris Hedges, who I've talked about before, he's a bit like Noam Chomsky, and George Monbiot, who's going to be at the event tonight, and Greta Thunberg. Now, Greta Thunberg is a young girl. Now, this is interesting. She's a young schoolgirl from Sweden who has organised an event and organised a international school strike of school children. And it has indeed, this happened all over the world. In fact, it happened in Oxford. There were some of them were in Oxford, actually walked out of school and went to Bond Square and did a demonstration. I couldn't do that, couldn't go there because I was at work, unfortunately. But she's very, very dedicated to this, and she's been meeting all great leaders and things like that. She reminds me of Samantha Smith from the 80s. So this is basically what it is, and well, I'll say more about what I think is the threat that this organisation poses. But first of all, I shouldn't really say any more until I've actually been to the meeting and I've heard what they've had to say, and maybe I'll make some notes and I'll talk about it then.
So yeah, it's I'm a little bit on edge. I mean, could be some challenging situations there, but I'm keen to hear what they have to say. You know, the actual Extinction Rebellion group, there is quite a busy one. There's quite an active one here in Oxford. As I was saying earlier on, I've seen the posters up in people's windows, at least one window. Two actually, because I just remembered I saw another one in another part of town. It's just quite a well-organised movement. It's international and it has quite a presence here in Oxford. So I'm now going to go and see what is going to happen and see I'm interested to hear what Lord Monbiot has to say. Now, in case you're wondering, I mean, that's the next question you're going to ask. Yes, I am wearing my disguise. This is a trip behind enemy territory. I'm getting too well known now. I think there's some people there who would recognise me and may give me a hard time. So I'm going to wear my disguise. So just to let you know. Okay, what I've got to do now is find somewhere where it's quiet, where I can actually put my disguise on. Okay, I now have my disguise on, so I will not be turning the camera to frame myself until after the event. I'm actually heading to the venue and down Queen's Lane, which is a dark, spooky lane, reputedly one of the most haunted places in Oxford. Lots of ghost hunts around here, and I'm interested in what's coming. I feel quite intrigued. I felt obliged to go to this event, just like I do some of the skeptic events. And this is very similar. This is very similar indeed. I suppose the problem is that the militancy now of politics and the polarisation of politics, especially in Britain, it's almost in a wartime situation. We're almost in a wartime situation now. And as I said in my 2016 video, war, it depends how you define war, because obviously, well, no one's shooting, no one's getting killed. Well, see Joe Cox, of course, MP. That I believe was a fake event, but there's no outright warfare yet. But I think the stages leading up to war, to that situation where people are actually being killed and things like that, does begin with other stages. There's the Bridge of Sighs there, isn't it lovely? And that is when the ability to communicate breaks down. That is the you have where people no longer listen to the other side of the story. They simply withdraw into tribal groups of their own belief systems and their own positions, and simply dehumanise those who disagree. And we're certainly seeing this, and we've certainly seen it on behalf of the other side from me. I mean, I don't see myself that way. I'm not willing to talk about anything, but you see that, for example, in the environmental movement. You see it in the political left. You see it with globalisation, the people who support globalisation and internationalism and authoritarianism, and nowhere is this militant attitude and this digging in attitude than in the environmental movement, because basically these people are terrified, absolutely terrified, because they believe the world is ending. They believe that the world is ending and it's our fault. It's the fault of human civilization. Now there are environmental destruction. I mean, it's ironic I'm making this statement. I'm passing Chemtrail Central, the Oxford Martin School, the headquarters of the Oxford University Geoengineering course. Because there is environmental destruction in the world, but it's not being caused by it's not climate change being caused by what is essentially plant food, a natural ingredient of the Earth's atmosphere, which fluctuates naturally anyway. And it's but you see, and since we've gone to the point now where if you really believe that the only way to save the world, you really believe the world's going to end, you know, millions of humans are going to become extinct, including lots of other species, the ice caps are going to melt, polar bears are going to drown, etc, etc, you'll do anything to stop it, absolutely anything. And I think, therefore, people who try to rationally put the other side of the story across and to question the foundational principles of the movement, why listen to them? Why? You know, I've seen this, they get called names like Dr. David Bellamy, Johnny Ball, TV presenters. They just get called names. They just get called climate change deniers, which of course rhymes with Holocaust denier, see? And it is anti-intellectual, and it is a shame. It's a shame that's happened, but it's what you have to expect. That people will act like this. It's what you would have to expect. So, and of course, as I've explained in my previous videos, and I will explain later on, The event lasts for 2 hours, finishes at 9:30. This is essentially what is motivating support for this greater and greater internationalism, greater and greater authoritarianism, which emerges in systems such as Agenda 21 and basically what the Paris Accord, which essentially is a mandate for deindustrialization and the imposition of a resource-based economy and carbon rationing. I mean, look at what Dr. Mayor Hillman was talking about. By any means necessary. What was it? Let me just quote him. I'm paraphrasing the quote, but it was, do we pander to the whims of the electorate who will do nothing except ask their politicians for what they want, holidays abroad, 2x4 cars, etc., etc., and the politicians do nothing except give in to the whims of their electorate to get them elected, to get themselves into power? Or do we, do we go with the democratic process that has so far failed? Or do we, as I argue, put that aside? These changes have to be made, whether the public like it or not. Otherwise we'll hand over a dying planet to future generations. And that is exactly what the New World Order want to hear. This is the Illuminati's perfect coup d'etat on the human mind. Dr. Maya Hillman and James Lovelock is saying essentially the same thing. We need a state of emergency to save the planet. An international state of emergency. Temporary, of course. Anyway, I'm nearly at the venue, so I'll say more afterwards. Okay, I'm heading for the venue now. The venue is actually a very nice place. It's the Wesley Memorial Church. It's a Victorian Gothic Revival church. And it's at New Inn Hall Street in Oxford, so you're getting a bit of tourist. I'm being tour guide again. You have to pay 20 quid to go on the open top buses, and I'm giving you for nothing. Yeah, it's a lovely venue actually, but it's a church, but it's also used for, it's sort of adapted itself into doing a social event, like many churches have had to these days. So we're heading there, get a shot of the building actually, because it's very nice. To cross over. And what I'll do is I'll put the camera away and go in and enjoy, if that's the right word, the event, and report on it later on. So this is a New Inn Hall Street here, and the venue, see the big tower there? That's the church. It's a very famous church, this one. The lights are on, they're all waiting for the poor people to come in and be told we're doomed, we're all doomed. We need the New World Order to save the planet, etc., etc. But more on that later, so I'll see you in a little while.
And here are some images from inside the venue. Once I got inside, I took a seat near the back at the right, as you can see, and well, there's the screen ahead where everything was being broadcast. It was very, very well organised and very, very. It seemed to be there seemed to be a lot of planning and preparation, and it was well rehearsed, put it that way. There were ushers to show people to their seats, and the flags, you could see flags on the pillars of the church, these Extinction Rebellion flags, and as you'll shortly see, there were people outside carrying flags, almost like an honour guard. And I sat next to a nice lady, and I spoke to her briefly, and we talked about what an important issue it is. I mean, I'm not going to. I was in disguise. I'm certainly not going to reveal to her my real feelings and my real intentions of being there. I just pretended to be another carbon-believing kind of what's the word? Environmentalist, a carbon-believing environmentalist, not Agenda 21, but one of these people who goes along with this idea, not with any necessary political solutions in mind, but with a fear of carbon emissions and climate change. I pretended to be one of those people. And it's funny though that, as I'll explain, I found it hard not to let that role come to the front and almost become part of my my front personality. It was very difficult not to get carried away with the atmosphere of the place, and I'll say more about that afterwards.
Okay, I'm outside now, it's over. And you see there's people with flags in there. Do you see the flags? Come on, focus. It's not focusing very well. I'll try and get a bit closer. There's these Extinction Rebellion flags in there. There we are, that's better. And that was the beach. And it was so full, not everyone could get in. And I need to go somewhere and take off my disguise. So I'll head over here, find somewhere a bit quiet, and take my disguise off, and then I'll carry on. That's better. I'm myself again now, and you can see me properly. Well, it was. I went in there, and you've seen the photographs. It was full. I mean, every seat, and indeed there were people sitting in the aisles. Some people were actually outside, not able to get in. The actual church has a capacity of 350 in the congregation, up on the balconies, in the stalls, whatever they call it in church, the nave, and there were people outside, huge crowd of people, huge, and there were ushers, and there were lots of ushers actually when I went in, who you could see them because they were dressed in t-shirts that had the Extinction Rebellion symbol on. Some of them had red berets as well, so it looked a little bit like kind of Black Panthers, Che Guevara type thing. But then that's what you'd expect, you know. I suppose that's what you'd expect. Now the symbol, I mean, the motto of Extinction Rebellion is tell the truth and act as if the truth was real, which is a strange kind of tautology or contradiction. I'm not sure which. But it's to do with the paradigm of prevention, which I was just speaking about before. That you go with the worst case scenario and act as if that is what you've got to face up to. Now I just need to get around the corner because some of the people who were there are still around. There was like a children warning at the beginning. The actual organiser said, any children here, you must realise, don't go before the end because we're going to reveal some very grim news. And they did. They really did reveal some grim news. And I couldn't help getting caught up in the emotion of the event. I mean, this is something I didn't expect. This is something I really, really didn't expect. I would actually, I went in there expecting just to kind of be enclosed within my little bubble of disagreement. That's what I expected. I thought that's what I thought that's what it would be like. But it's not, and maybe it's to do with psychology and group psychology. But I found myself getting sucked into it all, and some of it was quite alarming and extreme. So, for example, there were three main speakers. There was the organiser's little speech, but then there was old Lord Monbiot who did a little speech, and then they had a double act with Rachel Chahan and Zahira Plummer. Rachel Chahan is not a climate scientist, an Arctic wildlife expert, biologist, and Zahira Plummer is a activist with Extinction Rebellion. And they talked about the scientific process. Now, I've got to say, maybe I'll add a little bit more on this when I get home, or maybe before I upload this, before I edit it. But I found myself, you see, what happened was they were almost in tears when they were speaking, because they talked about a lot of things. Now, some of the things that, I mean, maybe the way I felt was because some of the things they were talking about are real threats. So, for example, I don't pretend, because it wasn't just about carbon emissions, it was about the general environmental conditions, the general environmental state of the world. A lot of it is very real. For example, I don't deny that we are in the 6th great mass extinction. I don't deny that. I don't deny that biodiversity is collapsing, and was it 30 species go extinct every week or something like that, and that half the life of the sea has disappeared. I don't deny that the oceans are polluted with well, a lot of it is plastic, just plastic litter, millions and millions of tons of plastic litter, just everywhere. I mean, it was in these big Pacific garbage patches, but you see it on the Atlantic garbage patch, but you see it on beaches in Antarctica and places like that. And this is plastic. This will take 4,000 years to break down. And I don't deny there's topsoil erosion. I mean, topsoil vanishing everywhere, and the lack of fresh water, and droughts and things like that, and deforestation. These things are all real, and I don't deny that. There are terrible environmental problems. And the thing about it is, I mean, the difference with me, I suppose, is because I don't accept climate change. But the rest of it's real. And also, I mean, they were talking about the environment, about the temperature, the global temperature warming significantly, and that was, and they had some graphs there, and again they started crying. I mean, this Dr. Jahan is a biologist, was talking about how these Arctic plants were dying and things like that, and that the ice caps were melting and stuff. And now there's a difference. You see, there's a even when, I mean, I don't know if anyone else has experienced this. It's impossible. I couldn't hold back a chill of horror, even though, I mean, I'm as certain as I can be that the climate change the world's experiencing now is not caused by human action. I've looked at both sides in this. I've watched debates. I know this intellectually, but you see, even when you know things intellectually, you can get caught up in the emotion. Like if you're watching, sometimes if I watch a sad movie, I find myself crying. Or I watch a horror movie, I find myself scared. And I think it's like that. Your emotional state is not directly connected to intellectual knowledge. It's not. You can be in one intellectual state and a different emotional state. I couldn't help, and this is something I really didn't expect when I went in there, that I found myself being carried along with the emotional tide in that room, because some of the people in the audience were crying, and the two speakers, I mean, were crying as well. They were sort of sniffing and holding it back, and they were still talking, but they were definitely shedding some tears over what they believe is this terrible disaster that's going to affect the world. You see, and I mean, the sad thing is, there are people who have given up on life because of this. I mean, Mike Rupert. I mean, see, you know what Mike Rupert is? He's a good guy. He was investigating 9/11 and things like that. He's a former police detective, and he shot himself. And I mean, I know some people say, no, Ben, it was an assassination. It was they killed him off because he was getting too close to the truth. No, guys, I'm sorry. It was a suicide. So was Rick Clay. I mean, not everything is a conspiracy to murder. Mike Rupert committed suicide because he believed the world was doomed and he didn't want to be around to see it. Maybe he'd been listening too much to Dr. Guy McPherson, I mentioned earlier. As I said, Dr. Guy McPherson is basically saying he's basically given up. He's basically said the earth is doomed. He goes around the world getting paid a lot of money to tell people that we're all going to die and the earth is going to die. It's the ultimate nihilistic, almost orgy. It's almost McPherson, it's almost a kind of like glorification of this prophecy of destruction, this portent of apocalypse, and he almost I think he enjoys it in a perverse way. Now, there's also like a story about a young woman who was caught up in this cyclone in Myanmar, and she survived. Her whole family was wiped out. Her husband and her 2 children were killed, and she survived by miracle. And one of the speakers read out her testimony, and everyone in the audience was really crying. It was really, really sad, because of course one of the predictions of climate change is that storms like that will become more common, and more people are going to be just destroyed. They also showed rising sea levels. It's going to half of East London's going to be underwater. Almost all of Florida is going to disappear. So Joe Dunn, that's about southern Florida, like Miami, that area is going to disappear. It's going to, because it's very close to sea level. It's only just above sea level, so only a very small sea level rise will inundate that entire area. City of Miami will be wiped out, and this is going to cause a huge. This is going to be repeated across the world. It's going to cause a huge refugee crisis and desertification and things like that. Oh, it's pretty awful. And then a young girl called Lynette. I don't know what her name. A 16-year-old girl called Lynette stood up and did a talk. Now she's led this school student strike, which has been, like I say, is international. It started in Sweden with this young girl Greta, and it's spread across the world. And she led the one in Oxford. And the one in Oxford was particularly successful because Bonds and Monbiot was at that as well. And about several hundred kids were in Bond Square. I remember doing something similar when I was a kid, actually, but it wasn't over climate change. I think it was over the poll tax or something. But I bunked off school and went to this meeting. It meant to this big protest. It was cool. It was good fun. And then there was some discussion over activism, how they go about it. Do they, blocking junctions in roads and things like that? They cited the various successful civil disobedience campaigns, like in India with Gandhi, and in the United States with Martin Luther King. And they said that that's the way to go forward. Non-violent direct action. And they actually did carry out a big road blockage in London. They could close Blackfriars Bridge for a few hours, just stand in the middle of the road. Disruptive activism, they said. Marches isn't good enough because people just walk past marches. There's now. They don't seem to be as extreme as Dr. Mayer Hillman. I mean, they say they talk about the establishment of a democratic committee of an environmental assembly to act as a branch of government to sort this out. But they don't sort of talk about any states of emergency and things like that, which was a relief. But it could, some people when they get desperate will do desperate things, and there's disagreement within these communities, with these environmental communities. For example, it was a Q&A session, and Monbiot, Lord Monbiot, he was talking. The question of nuclear power came up, and that's very contentious in the environmental movement. And he did his speech. Monbiot, Lord Monbiot, that spinning little twit, as Alex. I can't stop thinking about Alex Jones and what he said about Monbiot. But Monbiot is very pro-nuclear power. That's a big issue. I think I mentioned it in a previous video, but he's extremely pro-nuclear power, and and half the audience didn't applaud. I mean, they were a very appreciative audience, applauding everyone, and some of them sort of like folded their arms. So there's disagreements within the community. So that's another thing that's happened. Okay, souvenirs. Well, there were 2 pieces of free literature I managed to pick up when I was there. There's this here called OLS, Oxfordshire Livable Streets Take Action. It's time for Oxfordshire to go Dutch as quickly as possible. What does that mean? It doesn't mean I'm paying equally for everything. It means Oxford needs half of arterial road surfaces are not signed and protected, segregated, bi-directional bike lanes, a livable city centre built for people on foot and on bike and free of private cars, low traffic neighbourhoods without rat runs, segregated high quality cycle links with nearby villages. Town centre, that's the city of Oxford. The county of Oxfordshire needs town centres built for people on foot and on bike, low traffic neighbourhoods without rat runs, segregated high quality cycle links between Oxfordshire towns. Joint OLS out and help kick the car addiction. Right, go Dutch. I mean, thing is, you may not get that unless you've been to the Netherlands, and I have, because I've got family there. My mother was a Dutch woman. I spent a lot of time there. That's pretty much what the Netherlands is like. They have cities, pedestrianised city centres, and lots of bike tracks everywhere. They have as many bike tracks as they do roads. Now, the reason they did that, the nice old Germans managed to bomb the hell out of the entire country. So, unfortunately, we don't have such altruistic Germans today. So, but this is just one of the leaflets they were handing out, and there's this one. Now, first of all, one side of it is the Extinction Rebellion artwork, the emblem. Now the motif here, this motif, as I said before, it's a very alarming, very striking, very potent motif. It's a genius of graphic design, actually, just a simple jagged outline of an hourglass and a circle. And look what's here. Look, there's more and more. You get more and more hourglasses at the corner. Look at the skulls everywhere. This is pretty dark stuff, isn't it? It's pretty macabre. Now, this is the other side. Rebel. Pardon me. We're rebelling. We are rebelling against the government for crimes against humanity. For 30 years, scientists have been telling us that climate change will kill us. Telling the government that climate change will kill us. During this time, emissions have been allowed to increase by 60%, and they're still going up. The forests are burning, temperatures are soaring, the ecosystem is dying. The lives of younger generation are in the balance. Find your courage and power through connecting with others. Because we're so very nearly out of time. There's their website, Extinction Rebellion. Well, I've covered this in the rest of the video, and I'll cover it I might do a little extra segment. I'm not sure. It depends if I've covered everything. But well, the thing is, governments know about this, and governments have been acting, and that's what the Paris Climate Accord was. And if it's not being implemented, it's because either, in the case of Trump, people are rebelling against that, or they're deliberately holding back so that the population will demand something even more extreme, as I explained before. So those are these 2 flyers and these 2 leaflets, just free handouts. Yeah, that's scary stuff. I mean, the kids, there were children there, and I know this stuff can really scare you when you're a kid. But they said that including Lynette, the little girl, or the 16-year-old girl, said the way to overcome fear is to take action. When you start doing something positive, you lose that dread. And I quite agree, even though I disagree on what they're taking action against. I certainly can sympathise with that, with the New World Order. Certainly, you know, if I wasn't doing anything, I wasn't doing Hapanwo, I would find the things I know about the world very difficult to cope with, and maybe I'll say more about that in a future video and describe that in more detail.
Now, one thing I should make very clear, and I should reiterate, because I didn't actually mention it in my live commentary on location, probably because, as I've explained, I found myself quite emotionally affected by the atmosphere of the event. But in a sense, even if you do believe that man-made climate change is a real threat, even if you believe that, and even if you don't, it makes no difference. The truth of the matter is it's a problem that can be solved by disclosure. There's absolutely no reason for it to destroy us. And of course, this includes the real threats that I've talked about, involving the plastic litter in the oceans and the topsoil and pollution and things like that. There is absolutely no reason why this is going to be a threat. Or if you declassify free energy, this would have to come as part of a major package of disclosure, which would include the reality of the extraterrestrial presence, i.e. the government admitting that UFOs were real and that we have been visited by civilizations from other worlds. They would have to admit that. When that comes out, what effect will it have? Goodness knows, I've had to think about that so much because of writing my books, Roswell Rising, a novel of disclosure, and the 2 sequels. And don't worry, this is not going to be an advert for those books, but anyway, go out and buy them, will you? Go buy them. Available at all good bookshops. Good bookshops now. So, because I wrote those books of a fictional scenario in which this happened, I had to think incredibly hard about the implications, the political, economic and social implications of, and scientific implications of, disclosure. That is, specifically, most importantly, free energy. Now, when you have free energy, you can basically, the problem of climate change solves itself, even if it was real, whether it's a real issue or not. And many other forms of environmental, in fact most forms of environmental damage would be solved by the introduction of free energy. Because with free energy you don't need to burn fossil fuels. All machinery can be run by free energy systems. And some of this is the power supplies and propulsion systems of extraterrestrial spacecraft, and some of them are discoveries of human inventors, the most famous being Nikola Tesla, but there were many others. Andrew Johnson has done a brilliant talk about this. And free energy, but not for the masses. It says it all. That's the title of his talk. Now, with free energy, all machinery could be run off free energy systems that would be clean, safe, and completely non-polluting, and would cost nothing. So therefore, you could have it almost anywhere in the world. Countries that at the moment, and in communities that are too poor to afford the price of fossil fuels, would be able to afford these free energy devices. So, in a sense, it would eliminate poverty. So it would have a wonderful effect on human society as well as the world at large. It's the natural world. It would eliminate most environmental destruction because it would you wouldn't get any pollution of either carbon dioxide, if you consider that pollution, but indeed all the other emissions from fossil fuels, the chemicals and the toxic material in petroleum and coal, which enters the atmosphere, the water, the soil. You'd be able to have a limitless supply of water, because there's a virtually limitless supply in the oceans. You can't use it at the moment because it's salty. But what you can also, the cost of irrigation, because irrigation needs to be would need some kind of pumping system to pump the water to where it's needed if you need it inland a long way from the sea. With free energy, you could do that for nothing. You could desalinate the seawater, turn it into fresh water, and pump it inland for as far as you wanted for no cost at all. And you could have a farm in the middle of the desert, or the Australian outback, or you could have fish farms in huge tanks in the Central Asia. You see, so you'd have a limitless supply of water. So you wouldn't need all these big dams that destroy the environment and poison everything. You wouldn't need you wouldn't have this problem of rivers drying up, which you see in the United States an awful lot now. You wouldn't have you wouldn't have starvation, because everyone would have as much food as they needed. You'd also, with the anti-gravity, of course, you'd have very fast transport everywhere in the world, again completely free. So all this could be solved, and I'm going to leave a link in the description box to some of the videos that I've made on this subject, where I go into this in more detail. And indeed, if you want to read my books, well, then please do so. But basically, if you go there, that's where I explore this in more detail, like I said. But it's really something I've studied very carefully and thought about an awful lot. So hopefully you'll find that helpful.
I think what stays with me most of all from this particular event is it wasn't what I expected. There was how should I put it? There was less. It wasn't as dark as I expected. I was expecting another talk like the one that Mayor Hillman gave. Check the links in the description box. I go into detail about Mayor Hillman and what he said there. But as I said, he's the guy who said we need, do away with democracy. We need a state of emergency. No, they're actually quite moderate, if anything, which you wouldn't think of regarding the points I made about their artwork and their insignia. They're actually quite moderate, these people, Extinction Rebellion, and the dramatic name, of course. But I do think I understand, based on the fact that I felt that emotional pull. And I felt it despite knowing, or being as sure as it's possible to be sure of anything, that what they're fearing is a dark delusion, for the most part. As I said, there's real environmental damage going on, but the climate change thing is a dark delusion. And so, I was going to say, if you get people into that state, that kind of emotional state can lead to a position where you will, as Adam Curtis said in that film Power of Nightmares, just come to the government and say, please, deliver us from this nightmare. Deliver us from our nightmare by any means you need to. We're just frightened and we want to stop being frightened. So we'll sacrifice our civil rights. We'll give you the state or corporations more power to do this. And of course, this is why they engineer these kinds of crises in the first place, whether they're real or whether they're perceived. It makes no difference. The point is, all that matters is that people believe that they're real. That's all that matters. I think, maybe there's a part, what I think concerns me, and I brought this up on previous videos, is that we might see geoengineering to actually increase the Earth's temperature, because, and this is something, it was a terrifying thought that struck me a while ago, and I think I mentioned it on a previous video, because, as I said, there was an active geoengineering program, even though, like I said, here in Oxford, the Martin School, you can get a degree in geoengineering. But there is an active geoengineering program anyway, the chemtrails. But what we've seen, I mean, even like the experts in that are saying this now, the climate scientists and people like that, they're saying that climate change did halt for a while. There was a 20-year halt in climate change, in the rise in temperature, but they say that's now over. But the question is, what if that's now going to? Someone give me a funny look. I'm going to move on. I'm going to walk on a little bit. So I'll just come somewhere a bit quieter. Hang on. I suppose what concerns me is, hang on. You see, what if the Earth's temperature naturally begins to decline now, begins to drop? Supposing there's evidence that it's unmistakable that the Earth's temperature is dropping. Now, a lot of the climate scientist things, a lot of what I've been looking into is that they fudge a lot of the information. So, for example, we're seeing like the ocean temperature rise. I covered this on Third Rail Radio. There's been a large spike in ocean temperatures, it's been said that this is caused by climate change, and it is. But the thing is, the ocean temperatures are delayed when it comes to ocean temperature rise, and the ocean is actually responding. I saw this on an alternative page. The ocean is actually responding to the warming in the atmosphere that took place between 1910 and 1970. When there was a big spike. There was a spike of a degree or so between those decades. So you'd expect, like a few years later, and there's a delay of about 5 decades or so, you'd expect a delay, and then the ocean temperature starts to rise accordingly. Now, if the Earth's atmosphere starts to cool, then the ocean will cool in a few decades' time. Things like that. The point is, though, that at some point, if the Earth's temperature does drop naturally, then at some point it's going to become incontrovertible, irrefutable. I don't know which one of those was Dr. Judy Wood's film, one of those. Anyway, whichever word you mean, they're synonyms. In which case, the weight of evidence will eventually force climate science to, in a sense, change its position, even within its mainstream self. Now, to prevent that from happening, what if the Illuminati choose to artificially raise the Earth's temperature? And so you will see the kinds of disasters that the climate change believers are actually coming out with. But it won't be caused by carbon dioxide emissions. It'll be caused by the Illuminati's geoengineering program. And that's something that I'm concerned about. I mean, it's a problem, because, I mean, of course, one of the things that Dr. Jehan was talking about was, he talked about the scientific process and things like that, and scientific consensus and stuff like that. The truth of the matter is, though, I've made this point before. If you have an intellectual environment when people like Dr. David Bellamy and Johnny Ball are being abused and called names, can you do proper science? That's the question. I would say no. I would say no, you can't. You can't do proper science under those conditions. But of course, so that's when you start talking about scientific consensuses and that consensi in that position, you're talking about people who essentially have a gun pointed at their head. I mean, scientists have rent to pay as well. You know, they have families. All the pressures that the rest of us suffer, scientists suffer as well, and that's a pretty good incentive to conform. It really is. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I believe that the real environmental catastrophes of the world have to be solved, and the fake ones have to be exposed as fake. Then we can get on to cleaning up the Pacific garbage patch. We can, these are things. I mean, I cover this in my book Roswell Redeemed. If you ever read my book Roswell Redeemed, I was wondering, the thing about this kind of thing could be a catalyst for disclosure. If you go along with the idea that willing disclosure is possible, which could actually be that is the case, then this sort of thing could be a catalyst for that. And I hope that is true. I hope that is true. But I think we'll just have to wait and see. Anyway, thank you for watching Hapanwo TV. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order.